Naturally Nourished Kids, I think, is really essential today because it's anti-inflammatory, low glycemic, and really sets the tone for mental and metabolic health. The fact is that ultra-processed foods are net harmful. They're not net neutral. This is really a timely solution to teach parents how to fuel with whole real foods, how to identify what is a food versus a processed product, and really how to feel confident with how to nourish our children through developmental age. So we always want to first start preliminary with, is this whole real food? Is this composed of single ingredients, or is it a product with multiple ingredients?
And we are live. Allie Miller back. How are you?
I am stoked to be here. Excited to catch up. It's been a little minute.
It has
all
been
sorts
a
of
while.
fun stuff to dig into today.
Lots of fun stuff for sure. So your book just came out. It's about to come out.
It comes out September 16th. Yes.
September 16th. Perfect.
Yes.
And perfect timing for us, having just had another kiddo. He's still obviously breastfeeding right now, but we're going to be using some recipes for sure.
God's perfect food. Can't do better than breast milk. And we talk in this book all the way from baby-led weaning with savory starts through making healthy hip in teenage years and everything in between. We all need it.
And remind me how old your kids are?
So I just have one, Stella, she's 9. And then Becky co-authored this with me, and she just had her third child. He's now, Otto is 5 weeks old, right around when you and Crystal, I think end of June is when she had him, on like the 28th or 27th. And then she has a almost 3-year-old and almost 5-year-old. So
nice.
we got a range.
One ahead of us. Rigel's 3 and Hazen's like just turned a month. So
yeah,
she's like just a little bit ahead of us on that.
That's right. Working on that basketball team.
yeah, exactly. How did y'all get connected, you and Becky?
Becky and I go back to 2014, I think, is when she started working for me as a food photographer and blog writer. And so she was, at that time, we're both recovering vegans. She was one of my, stars on my tool belt of a recovery. After she heard about my experience, I was running Naturally Nourished. I opened that company in 2012. And at that time, she was running some juice bars. And we connected through the farmer's market and that whole concept of food as medicine and being a locavore. And then pretty quickly on, she did a micronutrient test with me. It was like, well, here's the B12, here's the carnitine, here's the zinc, and so very quickly she started redefining her own relationship with food and moving more snout to tail, more ancestral eating, and was a self-taught photographer. And I said, hey, I'm doing this clinic thing. Why don't you take pictures? And we'd meet every couple weeks and just kind of build out visions of recipes to develop. And then she ended up going back to school and getting her master's in nutrition to become a functional medicine nutritionist or dietitian as well. So now she works in my clinic and sees patients with me. And we've been doing the Naturally Nourished podcast with her as my co-host since 2017. And then we launched Naturally Nourished YouTube channel in 2020. And now we put out Naturally Nourished Kids together as our first co-authored project. She photographed my book, The Anti-Anxiety Diet Cookbook, and she photographed my first book, Naturally Nourished, as well. So
very cool. It's awesome when you got like an employee or a client that becomes an employee that becomes like an integral part of the team. Like it's the best case scenario for sure.
Yes. Work wife, sister.
Yeah, totally. What was the inception of the latest book? Like, was that something that you had kind of in your mind to create for a while, or was she pushing for it because she's got 3 kids, or what was the
Well,
the
we
catalyst?
both, so the Anti-Anxiety Diet Cookbook came out in 2019, and she was pregnant with Noah in December of that year. And I remember very vividly, we were planning the March 2020 book tour on the East Coast, and we were walking, and she was just starting to show, in that end of that getting into that second trimester. And we were just jiving on prenatal health and baby-led weaning and all the things. And I was like, I just haven't really had time to dig into that, but that's got to be the next project, and we got to write it together because we have different levels of this continuum of, where I am with Stella. At that time, Stella was 3. And so, I said, well, who knows if God will give us another child, but I do know that you're in the process. I've lived it. This is something that we really need to share with the masses. And so we started putting together elements and concepts, and it's really been a hard driving project for the last 5 years. It took us some serious elbow grease to get a mainstream publisher to sign, I think probably because of my medical freedom messaging during the bad season. So that was a lot of God and perseverance. And I think it dropping now with the MAHA movement and back to school could not be a more
Better
perfect
timing.
set scene for the release of Naturally Nourished Kids. So I think a lot of divine intervention there.
Yeah, March of 2020 probably wasn't the ideal time to be promoting something outside of COVID. Like that was pretty much, that stole the spotlight.
Right. So it was a lot about, being mindful of medical intervention choice and masks and safer cleaners that are non-toxic for the classroom, which are very important concepts as well. But Naturally Nourished Kids, I think, is really essential today because it's anti-inflammatory, low glycemic, and really sets the tone for mental and metabolic health. And at this climate and this time, we're seeing 1 in 5 kids diagnosed with a learning disorder or a mental disorder. We're seeing 20% of children on at least one pharmaceutical drug. We're seeing obesity and prediabetes just skyrocketing and fertility plummeting. So this is really a time for pivot and to get back in the kitchen. I think that in itself is a big barrier for many. But I think with what's hitting in the climate politically with banning of food dyes and the understanding of more of a national conversation on seed oils and ultra processed foods and how we're subsidizing them and other elements in the big picture industry that are driving metabolic dysfunction, that this is really a timely solution to teach parents how to fuel with whole real foods, how to identify what is a food versus a processed product, and really how to feel confident with how to nourish our children through developmental age.
Totally agree. It seems as though, like, obviously the obesity epidemic and just the lack of health that our society is faced with these days, like that demographic has grown. But on the same token, the people interested in actually diving deeper, taking initiative over their health, like that demographic has also grown. So I think by proportion, we're still getting sicker and sicker than we've ever been. But there seems to be a growing body of people that are like actually trying to figure things out and improve themselves.
Yes, like the bell curve is getting narrower because there's more people falling into that desired health, right? Versus kind of,
Totally.
I think, maybe 2 decades ago, that bell curve was quite grand and disease and discrepancy of wellness. Now we're seeing a lot more dynamic for sure.
Yeah. It seems, though, it's unfortunate that a lot of people, especially like the people that I'm working with, like they're coming to me wanting to take initiative after they've already kind of given up their health. Like they're trying to make up from lost ground. And like with kids, like they're a blank canvas. Like they got so much potential, and like I don't think it's malicious. Like their parents oftentimes just don't know. They're just ignorant, and it's putting them on a very bad path early on. And plus you get the whole epigenetic phenomenon that you can throw into the conversation. That just creates a whole lot more havoc. But do you feel like the demographic of parents wanting to get started off on the right foot with their kids in adolescence is also growing at a similar rate?
Yes, and similar so in the sense that also there's more than ever disease and neurological imbalance that we've seen today, than we've seen in prior years. And so I think there's more of a need, more of a concern for prevention or maybe getting ahead of things. I think in the world of ADHD for certain, and, I'm in the natural medicine field, so people seek me for alternative solutions, but I'm seeing a lot more parents when we think in our generation, when the Ritalin and the Adderall and those stimulant drugs were really not questioned or thought through. I'm seeing a lot of parents, although maybe the school or teacher or they've tested to fall into said category and have had recommended pharmacological interventions, a lot of parents that are hesitating or pausing or wanting to seek food as medicine, supplement support, or really understand even different learning environments for their child when they're getting these diagnoses. So I think that's a positive win because we're still seeing such significant addiction and neurotransmitter imbalance from use of those medications. And this can carry into the 30s, into the 40s, et cetera, of an aging adult.
Yeah, it wakes you up to the reality that we live in when, like, we'll take, now that we have kids, like, we'll go to the playground and we'll just watch people and we'll judge people. We're those people. But like, when you've got someone that's older and mature and just advanced in years and they're overweight, it's like, okay, they've done that to themselves. It's unfortunate, but that's just what they've created. Then you look at people like little kids that are 5, 6, 7 years old and they're like morbidly obese and can't even get on the play equipment because they're just so unhealthy. It's like, man, you can't blame them for it, but like that seems to be much more common than not. And there's been several kids that I've run into that are literally diabetic in single digit ages. And it's just like, how is that even happening?
Yes, we've now diagnosed type 2 diabetes as early as age 4. And it literally, within my lifespan as a certified diabetes educator, used to be called adult onset diabetes. Like it literally wasn't called type 2, it was called adult onset, which deemed it a lifestyle disorder. And then that, over the last 15 years, had to be rebranded to type 2 diabetes. And now, it's very far from adult, where we're in that extended toddler stage that we're starting to see it because of the amounts of refined sugar and high fructose corn syrup, and just the metabolic syndrome that we're seeing and the stress to the liver.
And I'm assuming, like, if a kid has, like, if they were, as the mother was pregnant, if she had gestational diabetes, the likelihood that that child is going to have type 2 diabetes at an early age is
significantly.
I don't know what the data is from a statistic standpoint, but I would assume exponentially higher.
No doubt. Yes, because you're giving baby higher levels of insulin right away, so you're priming them for that hyperinsulinemia and then earlier onset of insulin resistance over time.
So if you're looking, I mean, your book dives into this, but when parents listen to this are just wanting to, like, okay, what's the low hanging fruit that I can put into action like today? What would be like the biggest pitfalls that people are making, and what's an easy swap or alternative that they can just do in their home to make a meaningful change?
Yes. So as far as like foundations, I'm not sure, these are the things that are necessary to eat naturally nourished or to support a naturally nourished child. First and foremost, the guideline is we have to feed them real foods. I like to call them God foods, foods that come from God, have grown, have lived. If a protein source has had a parent, was birthed by a mother, because unfortunately we're already seeing lab grown petri dish meat out there. So that matters to define what is God food versus what is a chemical experiment. So these preliminary elements of something that was alive, something that can decay or mold or wilt, these are always going to have more complexity and nuance than we can ever synthetically make in a lab. And that is because we are not as divinely intuitive and creative. Anytime we try to mess with something in its perfect natural form, let's compare breast milk to formula. We're every 5 years trying to catch up to find a new thing. Like, there is human milk oligosaccharides in breast milk, and you can't lab manufacture or synthesize human milk oligosaccharides. They can put oligosaccharides, they can put another, fermentable carbohydrate, but that does not prime the microbiome the same as mother's milk. We can add colostrum from cow now into formula, but it's not the same as mama's colostrum that grew the baby. We're not adding CBD to formula yet, but I think we will, because we know that there's even cannabidiol in mama's breast milk, and that likely plays a role with baby's regulation of appetite and inflammation and sleep. So I think soon we'll see trying to add that as a synthetic. And so there's always 5, 6, 7 steps ahead that nature provides. And we can look at that in, the complexity of the phytocompounds and nutrients in an apple versus, of course, the further far down the line of what some individuals would say all foods fit, an apple gummy, right? Has the same carbs, has the same macros, has the same vitamin C, but does it have quercetin? Does it have unique flavonoids? Does it have unique antioxidants? So we always want to first start preliminary with, is this God food? Is this whole real food? Is this composed of single ingredients, or is it a product with multiple ingredients? So that's kind of like the first tier to start. And absolutely, there are some packaged foods that fit the bill. But then we go further to say, can you identify and understand the ingredients listed, right? Are these foods or are these chemical additives? And the important element of that is that we hear often in the messaging that those are just empty calories or, ultra processed foods. Oh, yeah, they could be high calorie, but we never hear, they kind of try to neutralize like it's a net zero effect and it might just be giving you too many calories. And that's not the fact. The fact is that ultra processed foods are net harmful. They're not net neutral. And so it's not only that you're missing out on these complex nutrients that the body requires for optimal health, but you're providing substrates, additives, binders, stabilizers, agricultural elements that were sprayed on after harvest, chemicals, neurotoxins that actually cause stress to that child's body, to the mitochondria or energy factories in their body. And then the body has dysmetabolic function because it's trying to protect itself from injury from consumed additives. So I think that's kind of like the preliminary is we have to get comfortable with first in the household identifying what is a whole real food. Where are there some processed products that we need to make swap outs in our household? So maybe it's that first after school snack. And, maybe we're looking at moving away from a packaged chip or some form of, processed sold gummy or other product that are sold to children. And we're changing that to fruit with nut butter, or we're changing that to a smoothie with single ingredients and a scoop of grass-fed whey in there. And so these little swap outs of, deconstructing patterns into new routines that come from whole real foods. And the breakfast, getting the eggs back on the table so we get choline for neurotransmitter and cognitive focus. We have so many recipes of egg cups, green eggs and ham, fun ways to get choline and brain supporting nutrients in those eggs for children. Even doing nut flour muffins and incorporating eggs far superior to a refined processed breakfast cereal. And that kind of takes me to the second point. So whole real foods versus processed products, and identify where the processed products are most poignant and how you can swap those out. And then the second is glycemic index and keeping carbs in check and having enough protein. And so that's the next level that we see and could be equally, especially on like a short-term observation with behavior, attention, focus, metabolism, blood sugar roller coaster, getting kids off of those spikes and crashes can be, as we've seen with adults, really within 24 hours, noticeable, appreciable change, whereas the toxicity element really kind of lingers and can build up over time. Correcting blood sugar in children, I think, would substantially lower disease rate, would substantially lower neurological issues, would substantially address, of course, obesity and dysmetabolic syndrome. And the first part of that for parents is understanding what a carb is.
Yeah.
And knowing that carbs are always going to find our children. So, we actually identify, of course, keto-friendly recipes in this book, and we identify children where we feel ketosis is a strong recommendation. For me currently, because I feel that kids are very metabolically active and they have good metabolic flexibility if we're priming them appropriately and giving them low glycemic diet. Many of them will make light amounts of ketones, and they're doing so from utero through exclusive breastfeeding, and we can keep them in that state with ease with whole real foods. When they're eating salmon and avocado and smashed blueberry, they're still making light nutritional ketones. And so fruits and starchy vegetables can be very appropriate, but for some kids, if they're on the level of consideration of a weight loss drug or a neurological medication, either as an antipsychotic or mood stabilizer or stimulant, at that level, I really suggest bringing carbs tighter and getting them into a more therapeutic ketone state so that they can reduce that oxidative stress in the brain. They can really reset that broken insulin response, and we can really get them more adaptable to experience that food freedom once we correct that handicap, if that makes sense. Uh, so,
100%.
so low glycemic is the way to go for sure. But for some kids, I think that keto is absolutely a strong recommendation, especially again if we're dealing with a condition that needs attention.
And technically, I mean, obviously, there's some naturally occurring sugars in breast milk, but like by way of macro distribution and the higher fat concentration in breast milk, like it's pretty much ketotic when you
Right.
look at the numbers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so again, they should be natural. And I believe, just as much as I believe that we are made to be omnivores, and again, there's a continuum of that, right? Some may be more in that carnivore side of things. I still think they would do well having some chimichurri here and there and getting some of those beneficial antioxidant rich herb seasoning spices that can prime the microbiome, combat pathogen, parasite, et cetera. There's reason that we have access to those things. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there'll be some that do really well with higher amount of phyto compound. I think the same thing with carb and ketone, right? Some really need tighter restrictions. Some have more flexibility, but I always want us to have access, if that makes
Totally.
sense, right? We always want to kind of be on that swing. We never want to fall off and lose the accessibility to ketones, because I'll tell you what, toddlers through teens, if we're talking about mood stability and we're talking about hanger, and we're talking about losing it and having breakdowns, if we don't have access to ketones and we are on a blood sugar roller coaster, especially in those trying years of autonomy and testing the lines, we're setting up for a lot more difficult parenting. We're setting up for a lot more, we're setting our children at a disadvantage on a behavioral level because they are feeling unhinged.
Mm-hmm.
We're not priming them through their palate to have a foundation of stability with their glucose. And so they are on that roller coaster and they're just grasping for straws. And unfortunately, I think that's happening unknowingly with a lot of parents, especially when they allow frequent grazing, the kids eating the veggie straws, again, all of the products sold to kids are processed refined carbs. So it's this squeeze snacks of applesauce, you name it, but super high glycemic, not balanced with protein and fat snacks. And then we're wondering why they're turning like topsy-turvies.
Yeah, I don't honestly know how parents do it because, like, with Rigel, like he's straight up ketogenic. Like we've prepared all of his meals from the beginning. I mean, he eats like the same things we eat. We don't have like kids meals for him.
Right.
If we ever do go out to eat, which is very rare, like we're buying it from the adult menu. It's like the same stuff
Yes.
we eat. His favorite food is steak or like raw oysters or something. But like he's 3 years old, high energy, totally bouncing off the walls at times. I can't imagine what he would be like if he was going hypo, and just all over the board. I mean, his nutrition's dialed in, and
Yes.
he's still crazy. So for parents that have like toddlers that are, dysregulating their nutrition, it's like, man, good luck to y'all.
Right. I mean, protein is so key. We talk about this a lot in the book. So we break down macros for kids and recommendations and ranges. And then we always reference the AAP guidelines, which I think is fine. And it's important to see, this is what's recommended, but this is what Naturally Nourished Kids recommends. And so, for reference, our protein recommendation, probably not surprising to you, is double that of the
Mm-hmm.
AAP guidelines. And our carb recommendation is less than half of that of the AAP guidelines. And fat actually is quite comparable, but it's more about the fact that more than 70% of the fats that most Americans get are from industrialized seed oils. And we're
Right.
talking about whole food fat forms. So it's more of a qualitative discrepancy there, but otherwise we flip it on its backside in the world of recommendations. And it's a disservice when we talk about protein in children if we aren't providing them, I believe, the recommendations of Naturally Nourished Kids, because the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that regulates decision-making, impulsivity, recollection, it's all of the kind of like higher level learning skills and most definitely behavioral skills, the part that processes consequence. We see that the prefrontal cortex performs better at a higher protein diet. And when on a high glycemic diet, there's a lot more dysregulation. And so, like, right away at that breakfast table, we're setting up whether that child is going to have better learning capacity, better influence on a social and peer level, and then even behavioral as far as, teacher involvement and discipline.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, you and I are speaking the same language here for sure. I mean, we probably feed our kids the exact same thing for the most part. Why do you think? Because I mean, at the end of the day, like this is all pretty straightforward. Eat real quality, nutrient dense foods. Like we could distill it down to that core essence, and it would make a massive difference.
Yes.
But like, and people know that. Like, people inherently know that. They know going to fast food and getting a Slurpee or whatever is not optimal. And I think what you said earlier about there being no neutral is key too. I always think you're either getting better or you're getting worse. There's no such thing as maintenance. There's no such thing as neutral. And I think people tend to tread water in life and not make definitive decisions because they think there's no consequences. But it's like, no, there's always a consequence. There's always a sacrifice. There's always a pro and con. There's no neutrality to anything that we do in life. And I feel like if parents took that approach to what they're feeding their kids, they would change what's in the closets or the pantries rather. But it's like, even with people knowing this relatively common sense thing of just eating real, whole, nutrient-dense foods, it's like impossible to go out in public and not just be inundated with it. Like we go to a pretty healthy church on Sundays. People of our similar demographic, they've all got kids or having kids. And it's like we send Rigel to like the kids group and like everyone's got goldfish. And Rigel doesn't eat them. Like he throws them away. Like he picks them up and throws them away. But it's like, why is that the default in the first place? Like all of y'all want to do right by your kids. Why is this the option?
Well, and that even opens the idea of, same thing happens at our church. It opens the idea of why we culturally need to associate like food as a reward, and also like food always has to be offered there. When Stella was learning multiplication, her teacher was always emailing me, can I give her, because every school year, get ready, every school year, it starts with that, okay. And Brady's like, all right, Allie. And it's always, I want to be an olive branch and I want to be an ally to you, teacher, not a thorn in your side. And I always try to kill him with kindness and be real sweet and not act like I'm a genius and I know all these things. It's just kind of like, oh, very, very passive and gentle. But it's always setting that tone of like, you get the form of food allergies. Well, first there's the vaccine exemption form that always goes through. And then there's the food allergy form. And it's like, well, I always, just write, Stella does not have any food allergies. However, we follow a very specific real food diet. This means single ingredients. And I write like a little phrase, and then I write a couple catchphrases like gluten-free, this and that. And I just put an asterisk and I say, please reach out to me anytime a snack is offered in the classroom so I can provide something for my daughter. And it started early on, at age 3 or so when she was doing Montessori schooling and different like play groups, where maybe I'd get an email and then I'd send her a special, avocado brownie that we made. And that was fun because it's like, that's Tim's birthday and look what you get to have. And there is an experience there. As she's aged, she's so funny. I just had her on the podcast myself. She's 9.
You got her on the podcast? That's awesome.
The biggest thing that we hear from other parents or culture or whatnot is that I'm going to set her up for an eating disorder. That's the backlash, right? Because isn't that going to set her up for disordered eating to not ever let her have Cheetos or to not let her ever have a ring pop or you fill in the blank, right? And my positioning is pretty direct, and she's responded quite well. We'll see every year one at a time. But my positioning is when we walk into our house, our mantle of our house, when we built it, we took Sharpies and wrote scripture on the walls and intention and principle. And we keep Romans 12 on the mantle in my house. And that scripture reads as, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind so that you can do God's good and powerful will. And so what that reads to me as a staple in our household is that we don't conform to the patterns of the secular norm. We're in this world, but we're not of this world. And food is just another part of that. So if I'm able to instill to Stella what it feels like to be different from age 3 through 9 and now going into 4th grade, she can feel swag and confidence knowing that, I just don't eat that. I find as a parent, and my argument for people saying that I'm creating this disadvantage of her not trying chemical shitstorms. My argument is, hey, when she's 13 and she sees kids bullying, she doesn't fall into the secular norm of being a jerk or bullying because she knows what's righteous to her. When she's 17 and friends are having sex, she knows what it's like to follow the purity of her spirit, and she knows what it's like to be different from secular norm. And so I think food is just another part of us developing their character, their principle, and honestly, good values. And as long as it's done in the household and that she understands the why behind it and doesn't feel victimized by the choices we're making as a family, she can actually see it as a sense of empowerment. Then I only see that as good and true. No one will ever be able to tell me that I'm wronging her and that I should be feeding her something that I knowingly, intelligently know is not food, doesn't belong in her body, doesn't nourish her, stresses her system for cultural norm.
Yeah, no,
It's
I
just
think
kind of wild.
that's a very good approach to it. Like I've gone back and forth with how I want to approach this with Rigel, because like we're gonna do homeschooling initially, so like we'll be able to kind of have direct control over what he's eating, especially in the early years. But it's like I just want to be able to teach him the why. I think that's key. I don't want to rule with an iron fist and just say no, because then he's gonna want to be rebellious. But
Right.
it's like I want to teach him. And I think parents should all take this approach of like, look at the outcome of actions compounded over a lifetime. Like all
Yes.
your friend kids that are at the parties eating cupcakes, like look at their parents. All right. They're all overweight and they can't play with them on the playground. Do you want to be like that? Do you
Right.
want me to be like that? I'm not like that because I take care of myself, and I want the same for you. And it's like, he's a boy. He's going to be interested in like Superman and other, heroes and whatnot. It's like, look, this is like your superpower. Like you
Yes.
eating real food is 100% the most tangible superpower you have. So if you want to do cool things, eat good things. I feel like if I break it down for him like that, it'll click,
100%. And that's what it's all about. We talk about that in Naturally Nourished Kids, is always finding your own child. And this is even with adults. We know this working with clients. What is their hook? What is their why? And how can you tie in the what to their why so that it's appreciable, it can be realized, and again, they can see it as a sense of ownership and empowerment. And so, I mean, we start as early as 2 with guided conversations. And I think that it's always important for acceptability, especially for parents listening. And this is an overwhelming shift. Maybe they've already maybe had the floodgates open and now they're trying to figure out how to remove things or weed things out. I think it's always really important that we have guided conversations and that the child gets some autonomy and ownership. At all ages, we want to be heard, seen, and understood through all ages. And so that is the most meaningful way to connect with and empower your child, to let them know that they're seen, understood, and heard. And you can do this with food in a way that honors their word and choice. It's always a disservice to dishonor an opportunity for your child. And so even extending into parenting of, let's say, like, it's you guys got to go. You got an appointment. You don't say to Rigel like, "Hey, buddy, do you want to get your shoes on?" Because then he's like, "No," and then you're like, "Well, too bad. You still got to get your shoes on." And it's like we just dishonored his word. Why give him a choice that he doesn't have? You say, "Hey, buddy, it's time to get your shoes on. Do you want to pick out a book that you want to bring in the car?" Cool. Then
Mm-hmm.
he just did something or do you want to wear your red shoes or your blue shoes? Kind of thing. And so that's, I mean, down to the level of micro. When we're talking food, it's we meal plan as a family. We show the layout from pulling from our deep freeze. She's a part of the process of going to the farmer's market. And then it's, hey, we got that snapper for dinner tonight. Do you want it dredged in almond flour and dipped in egg, like a fish stick kind of vibe? Or do you want it cooked in butter with a side of spinach? So it's like the fish is happening. Which
Yeah.
preparation are you into? Or as she grows now, she has stove privilege, so she gets to light the gas flame, and that's really cool. What part of dinner do you want to make? These are the things that we're serving. Or when we're making your lunch, hey, do you want protein kebabs or you want leftover burger from last night's dinner? So it's never saying, what do you want for dinner? Because even with all that she knows at age 9, if I ask her a question like that, it might be a silly answer. It might not be that, because she's going to be like, pizza, and we make sourdough pizza and sometimes that works. But, I always want to give guided choice, which sets her up for empowerment and ownership. And then that way the wins are so much easier to make. And they feel like there's a part of them at the table. And I think that that's super important.
Totally agree. You're familiar with Bill Schindler, right? You know each other?
Yep.
Yeah, he's awesome, awesome guy. But he's a big advocate for like, sitting down, preparing food together as a
Yes.
family from primal cuts. Like go get a whole chicken,
Yes.
learn how
Break
to
it down.
process it as a family, and do it together. And I think one thing that I always did when I was a kid with my family, and something that I've brought into my household now that I have kids, is like we cook and sit down as a family to eat, and it's always real food. And I feel like that simple shift, like that solves so many of the problems right out the gates. Because like if you're preparing a meal together as a family unit and sitting down, I
Yes.
will say we'll cook it all, we'll say the blessing. Rigel's been saying the blessing, and then he'll look at his plate and be like, I got some fats and proteins on my plate. Like he knows the macros, he's 3 years old. And then he'll eat it and he'll take pride in eating it because it's like he helped prepare it. I mean, he's kind of getting in the way more often than not at 3, but like he tries to help.
Yeah.
But it's like that's like if people just simply ate together as a family as opposed to just sticking something in the microwave and watching Netflix, I think that simple thing would change the trajectory of so many people's health.
No doubt. And it's another continuum, right? Where the first step is just getting your kids in your kitchen. And I mean, I would argue outside play is the only thing that I would honor of like, okay, if they're like really into outside play, maybe you don't have to call them into the kitchen while you're preparing all the time. But if they're inside play, doing their homework, of course, watching a show, trying to do something like that, they got to be in the kitchen during meal preparation, and they can paint in the kitchen. They can do their homework. They're still getting that osmosis and that presence and that priming of appetite. And then we go further in the continuum of how can you get them involved. We have a section by age, and we have 1 to 3 as a section of responsibilities. And so it can start as simple as putting a napkin on each space of the table. And it's like, again, things that, yes, can take 7 minutes instead of 20 seconds, right? Of
Hmm.
like, and mama gets a napkin. Okay, then we walk back over, and then the napkins all fall out, and then we have to refold said napkins. But it's a process, and there's that ownership and that pride, when mama uses that napkin, that like you provided that. And it comes to pouring water from a pitcher, whisking an egg, washing the lettuce, and we are really big fans of something called a leaning tower. I don't know if y'all have something like that.
Hmm.
It's just like a wooden platform, and it scales with kids all the way to age 5. I'll send you a link after. But it's really cool because Rigel would be able to climb up there, and then he's at countertop height. And then, he's like in it.
Okay,
And
okay, I
then
got
baby
you.
will eventually be able to pull up on it. And it's just this piece that you can kind of put by your countertop. But so cool because very quickly then they're getting handsy with stuff. They're engaging, and then there's even more sense of pride of, hey, I made those fritters, or I helped with the meatballs, etc.
Yeah, no, I think getting involved, taking some ownership is crucial. I feel blessed because like I knew all this stuff that I know about nutrition before we had Rigel. Like Crystal had been, keto for 7 years before she'd even gotten
Yes.
pregnant with him or something like that. So he just was born into it. But I feel like a lot of the pushback that I get from people that have kids, where they have kids, they develop bad habits, then they learn about health and nutrition, and then they try to instill that into their kids that already have those bad habits
Right.
formed, which would be tough. Like when I think of putting myself in that position, it's like, man, that would be tough. Like if they're used to eating, gummy bears, like how do you swap that out for, collagen gummies? And like my philosophy is, well, you've got I mean, you're the one buying the groceries, so like just put good stuff in the house to begin with. But
Right.
like, how do you address that kind of pushback where these kids have a palate, it's already jacked up, they're accustomed to sweet things? Like, how do you reverse engineer that?
I think it's just starting, like you said, each win at a time, right? And so, yes, we have a dirt cake recipe in the indulgences section where there's 3 types of gummy worms, made with fresh squeezed juice and gelatin. And that does the trick. It's a lot more labor. And I think that that's an important point to make for parents as well. I think when we're eating whole real foods, there is very easy self-limitation and more ability to be intuitive of what your body needs because we're working with whole real foods. So we get
Hmm.
undisturbed feedback, if that makes sense, right? And so that's why also no one's going to sit there and eat, in my perspective, so much anti-nutrient in broccoli because they're going to be farting and burping and uncomfortable. And so it's like, I'm not worried about over consuming, for instance, let's say liver as well, because it's kind of a self-limiting food based on its taste. It's a little bit gamier. So when we are putting ourselves up to food scientists, which are not using whole real foods, and then intentionally manipulating with hyperpalatable ingredients. We talk about hyperpalatability and satisfaction studies. There's actually a study that I reference in here where it looked at a 2-week crossover research study on groups that ate first an ultra-processed food diet compared to a whole foods diet, eating very similar in the macros. So, they tried to keep relative offerings of carb, protein, fat. And the individuals in the ultra-processed food overate 250, plus calories at minimum per day when offered the ultra-processed foods. And they all gained weight. And then when they crossed over, vice versa, whether they started whole or processed, the opposite happened. When they went to the whole foods diet, they ate net less calories. They reported the same satiation and in some cases enhanced satiation or better palatability of the foods, and yet they lost weight. And so, I think that that's an argument we hear all the time of like, well, ultra processed foods taste better. I think if we actually are in the experience of eating and we have the opportunity to eat whole real foods compared to processed foods, we may not be choosing it, but it's that transition to get those on the table and to offer those and to kind of ring out or reset so that we can get that appreciability, that satiety, because there's no way anyone can intuitively consume Oreos, can intuitively consume an ultra processed snack food like Pringles or you name it, because they've been wired to dysregulate our satiety and to make more addictive dopamine tendency. And so we're set up to fail, metabolically speaking, by trying to be able to work with these foods. And it really takes a true reset in the palate. And I would say to parents of where, again, I would look at a timing of where ultra-processed foods are highest susceptible. So I tend to call out after-school snacks. Like I said, I think making a smoothie is a really good opportunity of single ingredients, seeing it happen, pushing the button, and giving our children a solid 20 grams of protein that maybe was more difficult to get into their lunchbox, especially if children can't reheat their lunches. That can be a barrier for many. With that being said, we have a whole lunch building guide, and we provide ideas like we call them cool kebabs. So that's something that Stella loved starting with first grade, where, there's all sorts of cool now toothpicks out there that are reusable. They might have a mermaid on it or a dinosaur or whatever. And then, she's able to grab a piece of raw cheddar, a piece of an olive, raw cheddar, cucumber, and chicken is usually what she throws on there. And they're great. I mean, that's very balanced, very real, very simple. And she still gets that funsy character element, maybe not on or in a product, but still has something kind of pizzazz-wise to have in the lunchbox with color.
So when it comes to like, schools, when they're in a outside of the home setting, like with Stella, for instance, she might have the empowerment and the confidence to like know why she's eating what she's eating and not feel swayed. But like, does she ever come home saying, people pick on her because of the food she's eating versus what they're eating? Like, is there any external factors at play there?
So she's this year going to be going to a bigger school than ever. And this is a big change for us. So there's going to be 180 fourth graders.
Wow.
From like a very small school from kinder. She's been with the same group. She's been at camps before, though, where people have laughed at her and said that she was eating dog food because it was like ground meat or something like that. And that was really hard on her. That was 2 summers ago. But again, we talked through it, and that's how we create fortitude and strength. And I think that she has some other techniques she knows this year that most of the kids will be eating in the cafeteria. Her last school didn't even have a cafeteria. So that'll be a change of her bringing a cold lunch. And we'll just kind of see day by day. But just last month, she dances, and the dance teacher got a cookie cake to like celebrate the season. And the dance teacher comes running out and she goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Stella told me that she can't have the cookie cake. She said she's gluten-free and food dye-free and free of stuff, so I shouldn't worry about it. But here, can she have any of this?" And she had like nut butters, just a bunch of stuff that no, she can't have.
Yeah.
But bless her heart, this lady's like seeing gluten-free on the thing, and she's like, "Oh, maybe she could have this. Maybe she could." And I looked at her and I said, "Hey, thank you so much. Is Stella upset in there?" And she said, "Oh no, she's dancing with her friends." And I said, "She ate a snack before she came to dance. I'm sure that this is upsetting you more than it is her.
Yeah.
My suggestion would be just let her play. really don't worry about coming up with a snack for her. And thank you so much for thinking about that. And that's so sweet of you. And that's how we really navigated as a family because, and as she's going to friends' houses, she was at a birthday party and she said, hey, Mom, she pulled it out of the snack bag. It was a Ghirardelli, I don't know how to say it, but that brand of
Yeah,
chocolate.
yeah, that chocolate, yeah.
She goes, this only has 3 ingredients I can't have. Better than, like in her mind, like she's giving and she said to me, we got in the car and I said, okay, baby. I was like, these kinds of conversations, sometimes we need to use discernment of what we can say in front of others. And because people's feelings can get hurt by our family's choices. And we never make our choices to judge others. We make our choices for our own family and our own choices. And so we can share our choices with the world, but we generally don't share what we don't do because some people see that as judgment. And so that's what we're navigating now at this 9 to 13 is when she goes to the friend's house, how can she eloquently say, no, thank you, but thank you, without saying, she identified,
Yeah.
THBQ and soy lecithin. And I forget the third ingredient she couldn't have in it. But, I watched that mom's face and I know that mom knows who I am. And she thought, this is the best chocolate she could find at Target or wherever. And bless her heart, I want her to see that win was better than probably the ring pop lollipop. So again, we're all on a continuum and I'm not here, nor is my daughter, nor my family, nor this book here to shame anyone. It's to empower and hopefully inspire. And that's how we try to live our lives, is like when people look at the Miller family, when people look at Stella or me or my husband, they don't know our principle because we shove it down their throat. They come to us with curiosity of what are you doing? What makes you so vibrant and alive? How can I have some of that? And that's what we want to be, the light, not the gauntlet, if you will.
Yeah, it's challenging because like,
It is.
I know you well, and it's like you would never maliciously attack somebody or belittle somebody. Like you're not coming at it from that angle. I'm not coming at it from that angle. But like we just had, Hayes and the baby and like people from the church are trying to offer to bring food.
Yes.
And it's like, man, I don't really want any of their food because I don't know what they're making it with. And it's super sweet, kind gesture. People that actually know us and are keto as well, like they'll try and make something up and that'll be very well received. But it's like, you become way more self-sufficient because you don't want to depend on anybody to do anything, but you certainly don't want to like shove it down their throat or
Right.
bemoan them or anything. But yeah, it is an interesting dynamic because there's just so much nuance that they would not think anything of. Like, oh, there's some soy lecithin in here. It's what even is that? No big deal.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you just when you know better, you do better. It's really that simple.
And that's why I'm so all about calling it God food or whole real foods, because if we, I'm not sure if you saw with the food dyes, even before the change in administration and RFK Jr. coming in, they were rebranding the names of food dyes because, again, food manufacturers and food scientists are always trying to stay abreast of what is the big bad wolf.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're so focused on, in the wellness space, identifying this single ingredient is going to give you cancer. I mean, we've been seeing with glyphosate. Now, some agribusinesses are shifting from glyphosate. Doesn't mean that they're not using other forms of equally or more toxic herbicides as an application. It's just that they know consumers know that word. So we saw this like with, the green dye being called tetrazine, for instance, because then consumers aren't seeing green number, whatever, and their eyes are only looking for that food dye. And they were like, well, I didn't see the bad ingredient, so it must be okay. We don't want to think about it in a exclusivity. We want to think of it in inclusivity. I know all these ingredients, I can eat this type of thing, right? Because otherwise we're just on their rat race and they're going to put the words that we want to see, like that gluten-free, no GMO, no food dye on the front so that parents take that bait. And I think that's where we have to watch out is not just waiting for that top-down change, but from the bottom up, really just pivoting. And I like that word pivot. And that's what we use in our household a lot with Stells is, like if things become really food-centric and you're feeling uncomfortable, pivot away, bring up another topic, bring up a song you like, like how do you just pivot from that? Because sometimes, and I know that she might be setting herself up for, like when kids did make fun of her about the dog food in that same conversation, they kind of teamed up on her and said, wait, so you've never eaten at McDonald's? Not even Chick-fil-A, says another one, not even, and they're like, because she's like a spectacle. They've never seen such a thing,
Yeah.
And again, when she's feeling that pressure, I don't want her to have to wear that. It's like, how do we pivot? How do we just pivot away from that? Like, what's the line? What's the joke? What's the shift? Because that's not her job to educate everyone. It's her job to just be who she is,
Totally. Yeah, I don't know how I'm going to address that with her. I think I'm just going to teach him jiu-jitsu. We're just going to put him in a jiu-jitsu class, let him be super confident and be able to self-defend himself and put those guys to shame.
Yeah, there you go.
So obviously eating real food, knowing the ingredient list, knowing where your food comes from. I feel like a lot of people, because like look at your dirt cake recipe, like super fun, that totally, satisfies that desire. There's the gummy bears in there, gummy worms in there. They're made with like gelatin, all real stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not ever going to find a high quality, gummy worm in any grocery store shelf. Like you got to make it. Like you got to put in the effort. You got to buy the raw ingredients. You got to put it together so that it's always going to take more time. And it oftentimes does cost a little bit more money if you're eating real food. There's definitely ways around it. Like we source all our stuff from local farmers or ranchers, and I like where our money is going and investing in that. But it's like you're never going to find that stuff on a big box convenience store shelf. And I think people just put so much emphasis on convenience to the detriment of their health. So how do people bridge that gap, or is it simply a matter of like just shifting your identity? It's like, look, there's a sacrifice there. How much do you want it? Period.
I think it's a part of both. It's both getting okay with knuckle and bear it at times, right? Like eating the cold leftover spaghetti squash casserole because you're at a Girl Scout outing and you're not going to eat what's in the cafeteria and you brought a cooler and you're going to eat it cold and it just tastes fine, and it's still nourishing. We've done that. And then there's also, though, the shift of, I think, looking at the opportunity to nourish our family as a blessing and an honor and an investment that holds value and is not a burden. I think that cultural shift needs to happen, and that cultural shift is cornerstone for both of us talking. And yet, even so, I'm sure I face it on a busy clinic day. I saw 8 patients and I'm just burned out. I love the accountability of knowing that I slacked that beef shoulder and seared it at 6:30 in the morning and it's in the slow cooker because that is done deal and I have nourishment. And all day, even when I'm stressed, I know that the nourishment tone and preparation is already completed and that it's just about the eating part. Or I know that maybe even it's a steak and I still have to sear it. But my answer to parents of saying not enough time is like, have you ever seared a steak? It's 3 to 5 minutes on each side. Like that's what the cooking is. For a moment, can I just say, like, you can make a very nourishing meal with an active participation time of 15 minutes. The meal planning, making sure you have all the pieces, yes, you probably need to do that once a week, and you should do that ideally with your partner. It should be a symbiotic experience and a plan. But there is very single preparation meals of a sheet pan of roasted veg and a pan-seared protein, maybe finish in the oven. There's just really no excuse for that. And I think that what's really important is when we're doing that and when we're seeing that timestamp and that opportunity is that we do it with joy. We find pleasure in the mundane because, like you said, kids are super smart and they observe us. They observe our energy and our frequency. They know our intention and what we like and dislike. And so if they see us grunting when we walk through the kitchen looking at the dirty dishes or thinking, ugh, I have to cook again, they're reading that. They're vibing on that. And they're like, ugh, eating at home again. It's not like this, like Aretha Franklin is banging and we're saying, hey, it was a long day, but let's bring it to the kitchen. Like, let's vibe it out. This is the cornerstone of our household. So I think that shift needs to happen where the kitchen becomes the most abundant space in the home. It's the greatest opportunity for the most important conversations, spiritual nourishment, and of course, nourishing our bodies with food as medicine. And when we see that as mothers, as fathers, and we walk through the house with that type of energy, I think that then makes it the place we want to be at the end of a hard day versus another thing to do kind of thing, And I think that's a game shift for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of my favorite parts of the day, coming home after working all day long and cooking a meal together, sitting down as a family. I mean, and our meals are super simple. I mean, I think Crystal and I are both bodybuilders. So like we eat a lot of the same things over and over again and we enjoy it. So like ground beef and eggs cooked in a cast iron skillet takes all of 8 minutes, maybe.
Right.
And I bought a little bitty cast iron skillet for Rigel. So I cook his food in that cast iron skillet. We'll both just eat out of our skillets.
Oh, so
and he
cute.
loves it. And it's like, I mean, it doesn't take any time. Like people, they'll go out to eat because they'll throw in, I don't have time to cook scenario. It's like when you factor in the cost of going out to eat, the time to sit down at a restaurant, look at the menu, order your food, wait to pay the tip. It's like, that is way more time than I've ever spent cooking a meal.
I mean, right. The only argument is the fast food option. But again, what we're getting on a level of not net neutral, net harmful from that is just an arguably low value of something that we can do within 15 minutes. And, there are more complex recipes in here. And that's fun too for those occasions. Like we have a really fantastic paleo chicken tender recipe, which I always like to keep a double batch of that frozen also for a night where it's like, hey, let's just throw these on a sheet pan and bake them in the oven. And we make a honey turmeric mustard. Fantastic. Done deal. A little aioli, a little avocado or olive oil mayo in there. Love it, And then there's ancestral chicken nuggets where we have cauliflower in there with an ancestral blend. So liver, heart, kidney, and dark meat of chicken. And that gets dredged in egg with a little bit of almond flour and seasonings. Also really good to par bake or par freeze. And that could be done on a really, the preparation part, again, is a little bit more laborious, but vibe it out, make a triple batch, and then you're good to go. You're set for a couple weeks with some options there. And things like casseroles too, or foods that reheat really well, maybe more investment on that initial, but knowing that on that Wednesday, Thursday, or whatever busy day with the baseball games that you come home for a quick reheat, that's always a good investment.
Totally. Do y'all ever really go out to restaurants? Like we typically cook everything in-house, but when we go to a restaurant once, maybe every 2 months or something, like it's pretty few and far between unless I'm at a conference or something.
Right.
But how do y'all do restaurant scenarios? Like obviously you probably prioritize nicer restaurants that are using food, like real food, not fast food, obviously. But like when y'all are going to like a steakhouse, for instance,
yes.
I mean, are you asking the wait staff, like, okay, what are you cooking this steak in? Or how do you approach all of that?
So instead of asking, I just tell them what I want because I just find that it comes off a little easier than like, again, being like, oh, I don't want that. And so steakhouses, I think, are the easiest place to generally eat nourishing foods because you can get a lot of single ingredient opportunities. Luckily in Texas, we have so many steakhouses that offer local grass-fed, literally name the ranch. And so we select first and foremost where we'll search like a farm to table if we're traveling. So I'll look for like, there actually is farm to table website, and then you can search, in that zip code, what restaurants. And that, at least to me on a qualitative level, means, okay, they're sourcing from local ranchers or growers. They're emphasizing seasonality on their menu. And, oh, look, they list their meat sourcing. And now we're already starting to see many of those spots saying, we cook in tallow right on the menu, or 99% seed oil free, which is another win for me. And then otherwise, I can just navigate some of the ingredients that I know would be more prone to a higher inflammatory option and just opt out of that. So we love doing raw oysters as a starter, nature's perfect food. Again, nothing to manipulate there. I do like a little mignonette sauce, which is just usually red wine vinegar and shallot. So very clean there. Or just lemon wedge. So that's usually a starter for us. Or I'll do maybe like a sashimi if there's something offered, maybe even a tartare, especially if it's like a Wagyu grass-fed. Those are really the only starters. And then maybe a salad, depending type of thing. But with an olive oil, I always inquire on the dressing. Is that I'll say, is that made with just an olive oil dressing? Because I only do olive oil as an oil. And they'll be like, oh yeah, it's just olive oil and vinegar or shallots or whatnot. Then I'll have that. And then steak, seared.
Yeah.
Only in butter, and then fish is usually pretty easy in the same vein. If we're on a vacation for a long period of time, we want to mix up our protein, and just like you, Stella knows that there was just one trip in Mexico where they had gourmet kids steak. They called it gourmet steak, and I forget one other entree that Stella was like, Oh, she was just getting eggs, bacon, and berries. But still, it was like, she was like, I can look at this kids menu. And I was like, you're right. What a cool kids menu. Because usually it's just, we're both getting a ribeye and there's enough for us to just share with her, including those oysters, or she'll get her own tenderloin type of thing. And she gets steak, basically.
Yeah, can't go wrong with steak.
Sometimes bunless burger. And I will say the tricky one that my husband and I have a disagreement on is he does let her have French fries. And that's like not the whatever the phrase is, the hill that I'm going to die on. I'm like, okay, so that's like the one that I'll like, but he does know if we're traveling that she's not allowed to have them more than twice in a given week. So, because very easily you open Pandora's lid and then they're having fries at lunch and dinner for 5 days. And it's like, no, dude, that wasn't the plan. So it's always finesse and navigating.
Where are you on the seed oil spectrum? Because you got like some people that are like, man, it's not that bad. You got all the evidence-based people are like, if you eat more seed oils, it's actually shown to improve health, which I'm not on that spectrum. Right. But then you get others that are like, man, seed oils are literally spawn of the devil, Satan. And if you have a seed oil, it's got a half-life of 2.5 years and it's going to be in your system forever for 1 teaspoon. It's like, where do you want to point yourself there?
I mean, I think in that secondary viewpoint, unfortunately, again, in this world, not of this world, we're set up to a lot of industrialized chemical exposure, unfortunately, from microplastics, from glyphosate, from seed oil, and so I never like to I always like to think about for each of those insults, what is the mechanism of action? How can I kind of hack my biochemistry or offset that influence both on an offense and defense? And I can circle back to those two if those are of interest. But in the world of seed oils, the way I look at it is, again, I'm not demonizing seeds. I'm not demonizing whole, real foods, but even something like avocado oil, which I talk to in this book, I think got the halo of safe, good choice, and yet much of it still is hexane extracted. And so when we're talking about seed oils, the concerns are that they're highly oxidized, and this makes them pro-inflammatory, and that to extract an oil from tiny seed requires a lot of chemical add-ins in a solvent side of things, which often will still yield hexanes in the end product. There's also bleaching. There's a lot of refining in that process. And so
deodorizing, they're all rancid in the first place.
Yes, deodorizing, yes. So then at the end, when we see that clear avocado oil versus what true avocado oil should look like, green, if you're looking at a cold pressed avocado oil and it still has polyphenols, it still has vitamin E, it still has unique nutrients as a god food and has just been pressed, not chemically adulterated, we're looking at two different foods, right? And so even my use of, because I think we all kind of, as we learn, we do better. I think avocado oil was so on trend. A lot of my recipes in the anti-anxiety diet used that as a good heat. And then I had to really listen to my intuition and look deeper into the science of why am I not roasting with olive oil when like they've been doing that for hundreds of years. And I traveled in Italy and I was like, do y'all have like a refined or a higher heat? No, everything's first pressed extra virgin olive oil. We cook with it, we drink it, it's on our skin. This is the god food. This is the primo extraction. Why would you bastardize it by oxidizing it to refine it? Right. And so I've come back to that of like, what is in the world of oils, the least extraction does not require chemical extraction. I will eat those oils. But like a lot of anti-seed oil people are eating avocado oil chips or avocado oil products, and it's still ultra refined. So I'm maybe a little bit more stringent, I would say, in most cases where we really lean into lard, tallow, butter, ghee, olive oil. Those are our go-to fats. And you'll see avocado oil used in probably 30% of this book, but had it come out 2 years earlier, it would have been 70%.
Yeah. If you have like using our scenario as an example, like again, we don't eat out, but maybe like twice every couple of months. and sometimes you don't know what to cook in things. And like we always opt in for the steak, and we typically ask them what is cooked in. If we're getting like a bunless burger, we're making sure they're not dousing it in canola oil.
Yeah.
Like we went, like when Crystal had her baby, for instance, our baby, I went to the cafeteria to see if I can like find something that I could eat. And like everything that was there was not good. But then somebody said, oh, you can have them make an omelet. I'm okay, perfect. I'll have them make an omelet to my specs. I'll be there standing over them, making
with
it's
real
all good.
eggs, crack them in front of me.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, I'm like, hey, can I get I wanted 12 eggs. I wanted 12 eggs for me, and she wanted an omelet. And then like he pours this oil on there, and then he like gets the eggs out of a carton, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like how would you mess up 12 eggs? He just did it.
Right.
But like if we go out to eat at a restaurant, for instance, there's probably a situation in which they used some type of canola oil or something unbeknownst to us to some extent. Like, is that something that you would lose sleep over, or not
No,
really
because I
sweat
think
too
the
much?
stress and the anxiety, I think we do our best. And like for that, it's funny, when we were in another family vacation, there was a buffet, and Stella has a my nephew, her cousin is also, I think he's 10 years old. And then she has one that's 2 years older than that. So a 12-year-old, 10-year-old, 9-year-old navigating the buffet. I mean, they were coming back with Trick cereal. They were coming back with waffles with ice cream scooped on it, with colored sprinkles and such. And she came back with her plate, bless her heart. And I'm like, okay. And didn't even ask me anything. She just, can I go get my own food? Yeah, for sure. And I'm just like, how's this going to go? We'll see. And she came back and she got an omelet, and she had cucumber slices and berries, and and carrot sticks, I think too. She like grabbed, I think it was garnish. It wasn't even food, like served. She's like, oh, I'll take that guy. And she comes back and she goes, Mama, I made them crack the eggs for my omelet. And I was like, you go, girl.
Nice.
And I like knew she didn't ask for the oil because like that, but like still, I was like, that's awesome, dude. I was like, that's great. Yes. Because you saw they had probably like the beater thing, and she's seen me do that in a line before. I think as far as like the fringe elements, again, of we're eating out less than 5% of our nourishment, we navigate best where we can, that at the end of the day, that kind of comes out in the wash because, like I said, we're always making trade-offs. We drive cars. We are in a modernized, industrialized world. And so where we can make imprint and impact, we wage those wars, and we just kind of keep improving. And there's maybe something else we whittle as we go forward. And maybe the next time we get an omelet when she's 11 and she's at a station, she'll ask them to cut a slice of butter in that pan, kind of thing. And even better, because the egg is secondary. That's not even a thought for her. That's like a natural thing. So I think it's just kind of a constant ongoing, and with everything I do with the anti-anxiety diet and knowing the impact of stress and cortisol on hormone, on neurological health, on metabolic health, I think we have to also have a sense of peace that our bodies are resilient. And as long as we are intentionally doing what is good and true, that it's all going to kind of work its way out, type of thing.
Yeah, no, I completely, totally agree. I feel like I can talk to you for like 3 more hours, Allie. When am I going to see you next? Are you going to be at what conference are you going to next?
I'm going to be at Hack Your Health in November. Mm-hmm.
I'll be there as well.
Yes.
I need to get down. No, this will be the first time they're doing it in Florida. So when they were in Austin, it was easy for me to just bring the whole crew because we're in Arkansas. But this time I'll just go probably solo, or maybe bring Greg. But I'll be speaking, and we'll be running around doing stuff. But I need to get down to Round Top again, see Jolie.
Yes.
You're not too far from Round Top, right?
Well, they did a pop-up in Wimberley, is the town where I'm in. So I'm an hour outside of Austin, and we're out here on 15 acres. We have chickens and an orchard and gardens, and just doing the thing, trying our best.
Very cool. We're about to get more chickens. I got everything fenced in. We're about to get some chickens and probably some more lamb at some point, because the raising lamb was super easy, and I love the taste of lamb.
And you guys got a dog too recently, right?
We got a dog, which is why we don't have chickens right now.
Okay.
But then we trained that dog, so hopefully we can now get chickens.
Yes. Ours is awesome on the property, and he's a really good protector for stells and rattlesnakes. He's a German Shepherd hybrid, but
nice.
We right now are down to 4. We've had groups of 26 birds. It's just the chicken hawks, the foxes, the raccoons, and we even have, now we've gone, and we're like building Fort Knox. So I'll let you know if we figure out the antidote, but it's a constant, it's humbling, really getting more intimately connected with how your food is made and the
Hmm.
process of, especially in the meat industry and even growing anything, extremely humbling. And I think that itself is nourishment to just kind of like put your hand on it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we all like we just get better the more we learn. And the people that are on this path, listen to this podcast, like they know the significance of eating real food. And when you start going down that rabbit hole, you just want to keep going, and it kind of transcends nutrition and blends into like the food, the clothes that you're wearing, the soaps that you're using, the household chemicals, all that stuff. And then when it comes to the food, like the more intimately connected you are to knowing where that food comes from, the more you appreciate it. Like I love the fact that I hunt, and most of the food that we eat
Yes.
is either stuff I've harvested, stuff we've raised, or knowing the local rancher that we got it from. Like we've got 3 chest freezers, and that's all that's in those food and in those freezers. And like when you know that, you understand the circle of life much more, and then you appreciate the food and you don't waste it. Because one of my biggest pet peeves is food waste, like throwing food away.
Sure.
Like, yeah, it just doesn't happen in my place.
And there's just more vitality, of course, in the experience of slaughter of an animal that had a vibrant life, was
Hmm.
actually using its musculature. I mean, we can look at nutrients like glutamine. I mean, there's so much data out there on nutrients we're getting from healthy meat, and I think that's a piece of nourishment as well that's important to hit on.
Totally agree. Well, Allie, we're going to have to meet up in person, talk shop, solve
do
all the
it.
world's problems. But until then, your book comes out on September 16th, correct, Amundo?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So September 16th. It's 100 low glycemic, anti-inflammatory real food recipes. There's an intro guide that talks about mastering macros with kids, guided conversations, how to work with taste adventures, which, really digs into, like we were talking about earlier, of that autonomy and listening and hearing our kids, because giving them the opportunity for wins at the dining table not only takes the stress off of parents and not only reduces food waste or the battlefield, but it makes it a pleasurable experience for all. And we're just really stoked on it. There's a bunch of beverages, there's lunches, there's breakfasts, savory starts, nourishing entrees, bone broth based soups, salads, and indulgences, just to round everything out. So like birthday blondies to tomato basil bone broth soup to ancestral chicken nuggets and everything in between.
Can't beat it. Can't beat it. We'll be making some of them for Rigel and Hazen when he's old enough to eat. So rest
Love
assured,
it.
we'll be putting the recipes to use.
Cool. Yeah, I'd love to hear your favorites.
100%. Appreciate you, Allie.
Awesome. Great conversation. Thanks again.
Likewise. Take care.
Bye.